There are moments in a person's life that divide everything, not in the way people usually describe, some slow drift from one season to the next. No, these are the moments that arrive like a door slamming in a quiet house. Before and after, everything different, nothing retrievable. This is one of those moments. Right now, on the 14th floor of a secured private hotel somewhere in this city, a man named Kai is seated at the head of a long, dark table. His hands are folded, his eyes are level, his suit is perfect. By every visible measure, he is the most controlled and powerful person in that room, and in Kai's world, visible measure is everything. Across from him sits Rex, the kind of man whose handshake was engineered specifically to feel like trust. Between them, translating every spoken word across 2 languages and 2 empires, is the woman Kai married. Yuna, his wife, moving between Korean and English with a fluency so effortless it looks like love. Here is what Kai does not know. Every number that has crossed that table today is wrong. Not by accident, not by confusion. Every figure Yuna has translated has been quietly adjusted before it ever reached Rex's ears. She has been doing this for 6 months. 6 months of sitting beside the man who trusts her without question and choosing someone else every single time. But secrets do not stay buried. They migrate, they find cracks, they leak into corridors and reach people who were never supposed to hear anything at all. In the hallway outside that room, a woman named Tiana is pressed against the wall. She has a mop, she has her phone, and she has almost no time left to decide whether to do the one thing she swore she would never do again: get involved. Kai did not build his empire the way people in his world usually do. He did not inherit it. He did not steal it. He built it the only way a 17-year-old boy with nothing can build anything, by deciding he had absolutely no other choice. His father's name was Sung, and the simplest thing you need to know about Sung is this: he was a good man, a genuinely good man in a world that does not build defenses for good men. He ran a small import business out of a rented office with a leaking ceiling and a view of a parking lot, and he did it with the specific, quiet dignity of a person who believed that working with integrity was enough protection against a world that did not always operate with any. He had one business partner he trusted completely, a man he had known since university, someone who ate at his table and held his children and laughed at his jokes, and all the while was quietly using Sung's name, Sung's signature, Sung's reputation as the legal facing of a financial arrangement built on a foundation so crooked that when it collapsed completely. The authorities did not come for the other man. They came for the name on the paperwork. They came for Sung. Kai was 17 when the investigation started, 19 when his father's business was dismantled, 21 when he stood at a grave in a coat 2 sizes too large and made a single decision so complete and so final that it reorganized everything about who he was going to be. He would never be the man who does not see it coming. He spent the next decade building an empire that operated on 2 principles: profitability and loyalty, in that order. He tested every person who came into his circle, not cruelly. He tested them the way a careful architect tests the load-bearing walls of a building before putting any real weight on them. He promoted the ones who passed. He cut the ones who did not. Every person in his organization understood one thing above all others: Kai did not forgive deception, not in business, not in friendship, not in any arrangement, formal or otherwise. He had one exception to that rule. He never applied it to Yuna. Before I go any further into this story, I have to stop and ask you something. If you have ever trusted someone so completely that it never even occurred to you to check, drop your city in the comments right now. Just your city. Because what I am about to show you about how Kai lived his life after that day is going to land very differently once you understand what that trust actually cost him. The way Kai saw it, the people around him were associates, allies. Even Tai, his right hand, was an extension of his professional world. But Yuna was different. Yuna was the part of his life that existed outside the architecture of consequence. She was the woman who had sat beside him through some of the most complex negotiations of his career, translating with a fluency and grace that made her indispensable. She was, in the private geography of Kai's inner world, the one safe place. This was the mistake. And it had been running for 6 months. Now Tiana had been on shift since 6 that morning. She had cleaned 4 conference suites, a private dining room, 2 executive bathrooms, and was now working her way methodically down the 14th floor corridor with the kind of quiet efficiency that comes from years of being genuinely good at a job that the people around her never paused to notice. This was not bitterness. It was just the weather of her world. She had come to this city because her brother was gone and her mother needed someone, and because in the specific arithmetic of grief and responsibility, what you do after you lose the person who was supposed to share the weight is you carry it yourself. So she carried it. She showed up. She did her work. She did not involve herself in anything that was not hers to be involved in. This was the rule, not a philosophy, a scar. On the 14th floor of that building, at a table that had hosted the most important conversation of Kai's professional life, there was a number that only 4 people in the entire world were supposed to know. 420 million. Tiana did not know this number existed. She did not know that the invoice she had filed that morning for the meeting room booking happened to contain, in its itemized accounting reference, that same 7-digit figure. She did not know that a conversation she was about to overhear would connect 3 lives across one corridor in a way that none of them would ever fully recover from. She was just cleaning the hall. The afternoon session began at 2 o'clock. Kai entered the negotiation room first. He always did. Not from habit, from calculation. The person who arrives at the table first controls the atmosphere before a single word is spoken. He sat. He folded his hands. He waited with the specific patience of a man who has learned that patience is its own form of dominance. Rex arrived 3 minutes later. Wide smile, open body language, the practiced warmth of someone who had spent decades engineering the impression that he was easy to trust. Kai watched him come through the door and perform the room the way a skilled actor performs an entrance, calibrated to seem unperformed. He thought what he often thought about Rex. The most dangerous people are never the ones who look dangerous. They greeted each other with the contained civility of 2 people who understood that this was not a friendship. It was a transaction that required the performance of friendship as a procedural lubricant. Yuna arrived last. She moved into the room with the quiet precision that always made Kai feel, in the private part of himself he rarely examined, that he had made the right choice. She was composed. She was fluent. She arranged herself beside Kai, placed one hand on the table, and looked at Rex with an expression of professional warmth. She nodded once. Rex looked at her. Something passed across his face so quickly that anyone not paying close attention would have missed it entirely. Kai was paying attention. He missed it. Kai opened. He laid out the parameters of the initial offer, measured and clear. 8 sentences, no unnecessary words. He watched Rex's face as Yuna began to translate, and he watched for the thing he always watched for in negotiations. The micro-adjustment. The involuntary recalculation that crosses a person's face when they hear a number they were not expecting. Rex's face was still. Too still. This was the first thing Kai noticed. Not a red flag. Not yet. Just a slight wrongness. The way a picture slightly off-center on a wall does not bother you consciously, but sits in your peripheral vision all afternoon. Yuna had translated the opening offer as 380 million. Kai had said 360. The difference was 20 million. 20 million was the difference between Kai keeping the upper hand and Rex knowing there was room to push. Yuna had not mistranslated because she slipped. She had mistranslated because Rex needed to know that room existed. She gave it to him. The audience knows this. Kai does not. I need to pause here for just 1 second, because we have all seen this in some form. A person who is supposed to be on your side quietly adjusting the information before it ever reaches you. Maybe not in a boardroom, maybe at the dinner table, maybe in a conversation you only found out about much later. Comment below. Did you see it coming, or did it blindside you completely? I genuinely want to know, because this story is about to get much heavier, and I want to know who in this room has been here before. In the corridor outside, Tiana had reached the section of hallway where the double doors of the meeting suite stood closed. Her cart was angled against the far wall. She was supposed to be at the linen closet at the corridor's end. She was exactly where she was supposed to be, but the door had not fully latched. And sometimes the things that change a life forever are not dramatic. They are not orchestrated. They are just a door that did not close completely and a woman who happened to be standing close enough to hear. Rex made his counter-proposal. He took his time with it. He was good at this. The deliberate pause before a number, the slight tilt of the head that suggested he was being generous in a way that personally cost him something. He quoted back a figure that was almost exactly what Yuna had implied was Kai's comfortable range, not Kai's opening range, not his flexible range, his comfortable range. The number that only a man who has been told in advance where to aim arrives at that quickly. Kai felt something shift in the room. He could not name it yet. He had spent 2 decades training himself to read rooms, and right now, the room was telling him something he did not yet have the information to interpret. He made a note in the margin of the document in front of him. 3 small characters in Korean, a private shorthand he had been using since his first negotiation 20 years ago. Something is wrong. The session broke for lunch at 12:30. Rex and Kai separated to opposite ends of the 14th floor. Tae moved between the corridor and the suite entrance with the specific, attentive stillness that was his professional vocabulary. The hotel staff cleared the table. The documents were gathered, the room went quiet, and Yuna asked to use the small side alcove adjacent to the meeting suite to make a private call. The alcove was a shallow recess in the corridor wall, partially screened by a tall, decorative plant. Under normal circumstances, Tiana would not have been in that section of corridor at all, but the housekeeping supervisor had reassigned her to clean the meeting suite while the session paused, which meant Tiana was in that corridor pushing her cart toward the suite doors, and the alcove was between her and the entrance, and Yuna was already in it with her back turned and her phone to her ear by the time Tiana came around the corner. Tiana slowed. She pulled her cart to a stop 6 feet away and looked in the opposite direction, planning to wait until the call finished. She was not trying to listen, but there are moments when listening becomes unavoidable, not because you press your ear to a door, because the information comes to you, because a corridor has specific acoustics, because a woman who thinks she is completely alone does not modulate her voice the way she would in public. Yuna spoke in Korean, which Tiana did not understand, and then she spoke in numbers. 420 million. That was the number Yuna read into the phone in English. Clearly, specifically, not approximately, not rounded, the exact figure, with a precision that is only possible when you are reading from something written or reciting something already memorized. Tiana did not know what 420 million meant in the context of this building and these men. What she knew was that morning, when she had filed the housekeeping invoice for the meeting room booking, she had processed a document that included a 7-digit accounting reference figure, the same 7 digits. Yuna ended the call. She stood for 1 moment in the alcove with her eyes closed and her phone pressed against her collarbone. Then she straightened. She turned. She walked back toward the suite entrance. She walked directly past Tiana, 2 feet of corridor between them. Close enough that Tiana could see the small pearl earring in Yuna's left ear, close enough that Yuna's perfume reached her. Yuna did not look at her. Tiana was invisible, and in that specific moment, invisibility saved everything. Tiana stood in the corridor for a long time after Yuna disappeared through the suite doors. Her brother's name was Marcus. He had been 26 when a business arrangement collapsed because the man he was supposed to be working with had been feeding information to the other side. Marcus had invested everything he had, and the person on the other side knew exactly where his pressure points were and had applied pressure to all of them simultaneously until there was nothing left. Marcus had looked at the rubble of that 6 months later and decided he could not rebuild from it. Tiana had known something was wrong before it happened. She had said nothing. She had told herself it was not her business. She had told herself she was probably misreading things. She had told herself 100 small and reasonable things that added up to one large and irreversible silence. She was not going to be silent again. The problem was not knowing. The problem was getting the information to the right person. Tiana worked through it the way she worked through any problem that needed solving, with inadequate resources, methodically, without panic, because panic was a luxury and she had never been able to afford it. She could not walk into the meeting suite. She did not have access. She could not approach Kai directly because she did not know him by sight well enough to pick him from the room, and walking up to a man like that without a proper introduction in a secured negotiation space was not simply awkward. In a room full of his security staff, it was actively dangerous. She could not call the front desk because the front desk would ask her what the issue was, and the issue involved the boss's wife, which meant the front desk would either not believe her or alert the wrong person. She needed the man in all black. She had seen him twice on the 14th floor that morning, square-faced, Korean, solid build, standing like a closed door. She did not know his name. What she knew was that he was clearly senior and clearly loyal to the man at the head of that table. She had seen the way his eyes moved when Kai moved through a space. Tracking, always tracking. That kind of loyalty was something Tiana understood. It was the same loyalty she had had toward Marcus, the loyalty of a person who has attached their entire sense of safety to another person's well-being. But first, she needed to do her job, because losing this job was not an option. She needed to be on this floor legitimately when the moment came, which right now meant the conference preparation room at the end of the hall, where the afternoon session materials were staged. She pushed her cart toward it. She opened the door. The room was small, a staging area for the afternoon session. Stacked document folders, portfolio binders, a credenza with water service. Tiana moved through it quickly and quietly. She was trained to work fast in occupied spaces. She stripped the used service items from the credenza and replaced them. She straightened the portfolios. She was reaching for the document stack to move it from the staging table to the service trolley when she saw it. Not the top document, not the second one. The third one down, offset slightly from the others so that the second page was partially visible. She did not mean to read it, but the second page was a signature page, and the name printed beneath the signature line was Kai's, and the entity on the recipient line was one of Rex's parent companies. She recognized it because it had appeared on the top of every official document in the conference folder she had filed that morning, and the date at the top of the page was not today. It was 3 months ago. This was not about one meeting. This was not about one afternoon session and one mistranslated number. This was a transfer agreement, a legal document outlining the movement of a portion of Kai's Eastern distribution network to Rex's parent company, already partially executed. Yuna's signature was on the second page, in the witnessing party section, her name in precise, neat characters, the ink dry on a document that predated this entire negotiation by 3 full months. 3 months before today's deal session, someone had already decided how this was going to end. They had been building the exit architecture while Kai was still under the impression he was building a partnership. Tiana's hands were shaking. She put the document down exactly as she had found it, offset, third from the top. She reached into her uniform pocket for her phone. She photographed 3 pages. She replaced the phone. She straightened the document stack. She completed the rest of her work in the preparation room with a precision so exact that anyone reviewing the room afterward would find nothing out of order. She walked back into the corridor and she looked for Tae. Tae saw her before she reached him. This was the thing about Tae. He noticed everything slightly off in a space he was responsible for. He had noticed Tiana 3 times already that morning, not because she had done anything unusual, because she had been on this floor for 6 hours, which was longer than a standard cleaning rotation, and because the 3rd time he had passed her in the corridor, she had been completely still in a way that had a quality distinct from normal resting stillness. He had filed this observation under the category of things to revisit if anything else prompted him to. The way she was walking toward him now was the prompt. He did not move. He watched her approach. His face gave nothing. His eyes gave everything, to anyone who knew how to read them. Tiana stopped in front of him. She was aware, in the specific heightened clarity of a high-stakes moment, of how this looked. A hotel cleaner approaching a private security operative in the corridor outside a secured business negotiation. She had no credentials, no authority, no reason to be taken seriously in a space like this one. She had a photograph and a dead brother and the specific conviction of a person who has made this mistake once and is not going to make it again. She said, "I need to speak to the man at the head of that table." Tae looked at her for a long moment. His expression did not change. Then he said, "Why?" Not a question, a test. Tiana told him two things, what she had heard in the alcove and what she had seen in the preparation room. She did not elaborate. She did not contextualize. She said the information in the same order she had processed it, calmly and specifically, because she had learned from her brother's life that the moment you start performing urgency instead of communicating it, the person in front of you stops listening to what you are saying and starts assessing your emotional state. She did not give Tae the option of dismissing her as hysterical. She was not hysterical. She was exact. When she finished speaking, Tae was quiet for 4 seconds. 4 seconds is a long time when you are standing in a secured corridor with information that belongs somewhere urgent. Then he said, "Don't move from this spot." He disappeared through the suite door. He was gone for 6 minutes. Tiana stood exactly where he had told her. She counted the seconds, not because she was anxious, but because counting was the thing her brain reached for when it needed something to hold. She thought about Marcus. She thought about the specific quality of his voice in the last phone call she had received from him, the one she had replayed in her memory so many times since that she could no longer be certain whether she remembered it accurately or had rebuilt it from grief. She thought about what it felt like to be too late. She thought about how completely different this moment felt from that one. She was not too late. The door opened. Tae held it, and Kai walked out into the corridor. Kai looked at Tiana. He had never seen her before. He registered this. His eyes moved across her with the systematic efficiency of a man who learned to read a room before he learned to read a book. He noted the uniform, the cleaning cap, the phone she held in both hands in front of her, the complete stillness of her posture, the way she held his gaze without flinching and without performing a confidence she was not fully feeling. He had encountered 1,000 people who wanted something from him. Something about the way this woman was standing told him that what she wanted was not for herself. He said, "Show me. Not who are you. Not why should I listen to you. Not do you know who I am. Show me." Tiana turned the phone screen toward him and scrolled through the photographs. She did not narrate them. She let him read. He went very still, not frozen. Still. The way a person goes still when they are moving very fast on the inside. His breathing was even. His face was controlled. His hands did not tighten on the phone. His eyes moved through the photographs with the systematic attention of a man who is simultaneously building a case and living through the discovery that the case is about his own wife. Then he looked up from the phone. He looked directly at Tiana. He said, very quietly, "How long have you worked in this building?" She told him. He nodded once. He handed the phone back. He turned and said 2 words to Tai. Then he turned back to Tiana and said, "Stay available. Do not speak to anyone else about this. Do not leave the floor. I need you to stop with me for 1 second right here, because I know what you are feeling, and it is exactly what I felt the first time I heard this story. Pure, clean outrage. She has been sitting beside him all morning. She has been adjusting every number that crossed that table. The woman who was supposed to be the one person he never had to defend himself against has been the weapon pointed at him the entire time. If you are angry right now, and you should be, put it in the comments. Because what happens next is exactly what she deserves." He went back through the door. Tiana stood in the corridor with her cleaning cart and the specific hollow relief of a person who has just done the hardest thing and is now waiting to find out what it costs. When Kai walked back into the negotiation room, he was not a man who had just been handed evidence of his wife's betrayal. He was, by every available exterior signal, a man who had stepped out briefly to handle an administrative matter and had returned with his full attention restored to the business at hand. He was extraordinary at this. Yuna watched him come through the door. She completed her assessment in under 3 seconds and concluded that nothing had changed. Whatever the brief interruption had been, it had not touched anything related to her. She felt something in her chest ease. She reset her expression. She was ready. Rex watched Kai settle back into his chair and also concluded that nothing had changed. He recalibrated slightly and reset his own position. Neither of them noticed that Kai's eyes, as he settled back in, took exactly 1 extra second to land on Yuna. 1 second, precisely. The afternoon session resumed. Kai opened with a recalibration of the offer, framing it as a reflection of the morning's productive exchange. He reached the figure. He stated it clearly. 395 million. He watched Yuna begin to translate. She said 410 million. She adjusted the number by 15 million upward, which told Rex that Kai had room between the stated offer and his ceiling, and that the ceiling was close. An offer of 410 suggests a ceiling somewhere between 420 and 430, which is exactly the ceiling Rex believed he knew from the phone call. What Rex did not know, Kai had stated 395 specifically because his real offer on the table was 400 million exactly, not 420, 400. The 420 figure that Yuna had given Rex was Kai's absolute walkaway point, not his target close. Rex had been operating with a figure that was simultaneously real and misleading, and Yuna had not known the difference, because Kai had never explained it to her. He had stated the number in her presence to test whether it would move across that table, and it had moved. Exactly as Tiana said it would. If you are watching this right now and you have just understood what Kai did, I need you to do one thing before this story goes any further. Subscribe right now. Because what you just watched is a man who received the worst news of his life, walked back into the room that contained the source of that news, and turned it into a precision instrument. And what is about to happen in the next 14 minutes is going to require you to be subscribed, because this is part of something much larger, and I promise you, you do not want to miss where this goes. Kai's eyes moved to Yuna for exactly 1 second. She did not see it. Rex moved when he thought he had the advantage. This was his consistent pattern across his entire professional life, a pattern that had served him well enough that he had never examined it. You acquire information. You wait for the moment of maximum positional strength. Then you move. He believed he was there. He reached into the document portfolio beside his chair and placed a single document on the table. The room shifted before anyone spoke, not dramatically, not loudly. It was the specific atmospheric change that happens when someone introduces an object that changes the meaning of the space, like a weapon placed on a table, not drawn, placed. He said, "Before we finalize the terms, I think we should acknowledge what has already been agreed." Kai looked at the document. He looked at it for exactly as long as it took him to confirm that it was the same document he had seen photographs of 40 minutes ago in a hotel corridor from a woman who had no reason to lie to him. Then he looked at Yuna, not for 1 second this time, for 3. Yuna felt it. The look. She had never been on the receiving end of a look like that from Kai. In 2 years of marriage, in hundreds of negotiations, in thousands of private moments, she had seen his controlled calm and his rare warmth, and once, briefly, the contained fury directed at a business associate who had tried to steal from him. She had never seen what was in his face right now. She could not name it. She would have time in the weeks that followed to understand what it was. It was the look of a man who loves you and already knows. Her fingers tightened on the table edge. I am going to stop here for exactly 5 seconds, because I need you to make a prediction before this next moment happens. Do you think Kai is going to confront Yuna directly in front of Rex right now? Or do you think he is going to do something that none of us are expecting? Put your answer in the comments right now, because I promise you, whatever you predicted, the next 4 minutes will tell you whether you truly understand how a man like Kai moves. Rex was speaking. He was framing the document as a mutual agreement reached in preliminary discussions. He was saying, with well-chosen language, that this transfer agreement meant even if today's deal fell apart, the underlying arrangement stood. He believed this was his insurance. He believed this was the moment the room tilted irreversibly in his favor. The door opened. Tae walked in. He was not alone. Rex stood. His social warmth had left his face completely. What was underneath it had been there all along. Kai watched Rex stand and said one sentence. Not loudly, not dramatically. The way you say something when you know it will land without any additional emphasis. He said, "You should sit back down." Rex sat. The two people who had entered with Tae were Kai's attorneys. The specific ones he used for the category of legal matter that involves intelligence gathered, evidence documented, and consequences prepared in advance of a confrontation the client already knows is coming. Tae had made a phone call during the lunch break. This was the detail Kai had asked him to handle with 2 words in the corridor outside the suite. 2 words that set the entire second act of the afternoon in motion, and Tae, who had spent his entire adult life understanding exactly what Kai needed before Kai finished saying it, had understood those 2 words completely. Kai placed his own document portfolio on the table. He opened it. He spoke methodically, without raising his voice, without accelerating his pace. He spoke the way he had spoken through every negotiation of his career, with the specific authority of a person who is fully prepared and is not in any hurry because there is nowhere for the room to go except through what he is about to say. He laid out 6 months, the first communication between Yuna and Rex's financial office, routed through a third-party relay that had since been traced. The altered translation records from 3 earlier preliminary sessions that Kai's digital security team had isolated and documented. The financial figures that had appeared in Rex's internal planning documents, figures that could only have come from one source. The draft transfer agreement dated 3 months ago, the phone call from the Alcove that afternoon, now recorded and time-stamped, and the photographs from a hotel staff member who had been exactly where she was supposed to be. Yuna had not moved since Tae entered the room. She was watching the documents being placed on the table one by one, and she was doing something she had never done in a negotiation room in her professional life. She was not calculating. She was not adjusting. She was not preparing a reframe. She was understanding. And the thing she was understanding was far worse than being caught. Kai reached the final section of the portfolio. He placed a single page in front of Rex. It contained a name, not Rex's name, not Yuna's, an older name, a private investment company that had been operating for 23 years, a company whose records, if you knew where to look and had spent 3 months looking, connected directly to the name of the man who had been the silent partner in the original arrangement that destroyed Kai's father. Rex's voice was very quiet when he said, "You know about him." Kai said, "I have known about him for 3 months." Rex was escorted from the room, not forcefully. He went with the quiet compliance of a man who understands that resistance is no longer a useful instrument. He straightened his jacket. He picked up his portfolio. He walked between Tae and the 2 attorneys toward the suite door. He did not look at Yuna. This was the moment that told Yuna everything. Because Rex had used her, had needed her composure, her access, her linguistic proximity to Kai, had built the entire operation around her ability to sit beside the most careful man in the room and translate his words in directions he would never detect. He had selected her not because she was his partner. He had selected her because she was useful. And now that the utility had expired, he walked out without a single backward glance. She had believed she was the architect. She had been the instrument. The door closed. The room was very quiet. Kai and Yuna were alone. He looked at her for a long time. She looked back at him. The performed warmth was gone. The calculation was gone. The stillness that had always been slightly too composed was gone. What was left was just a woman at a table who had made a series of choices she could not now unmake, sitting across from the man those choices had been made against. He said, very quietly, I never asked you what you wanted. It was not an apology, not an absolution. It was the most devastating thing he could have said because it was true, and because truth delivered at the end of a betrayal lands differently than truth delivered anywhere else. He was not forgiving her, he was witnessing her. He saw her. In the wreckage of everything she had done, he saw her. Then he stood. He walked toward the door. At the threshold, he stopped. He said, "My father trusted the wrong person because he never thought to check. I will not make that mistake again. With anyone." He walked out. Tiana was still on the 14th floor when it ended. She had done what Kai asked. She had stayed on the floor. She had completed her remaining duties in the room she was assigned to, with the methodical focus of a person who is not yet ready to feel everything they are going to feel about what just happened. She was almost finished when Tae appeared at the end of the corridor. He walked toward her without hurry. He stopped in front of her. He held out a white envelope. She looked at it. He said, "From him. Before I tell you what was in that envelope, I need you to share this video with one person who needs to see what it looks like when someone decides not to stay silent, because this moment right here is the part of the story that does not get told enough. Share it. Then come right back." She opened it in the elevator on the way down. Inside the envelope was a sum of money she had not asked for and had not expected. And beneath the money was a handwritten note, folded once. 3 words, "I see you, I see you." 3 words. From a man who had built his entire empire on the principle that he would never be the person who did not look closely enough. He looked. He saw Tiana, a woman who had every reason to walk past that alcove, and every reason to put the document back, and every reason to protect her job and her silence and her carefully maintained distance from everything that was not hers to carry. She carried it anyway. That night, Kai made one phone call. The name on that final document, the 23-year-old company, the shadow behind Rex and behind the original destruction of his father's life. The person on the other end of that call did not sleep again for 6 months. If you are watching this and you need to know what that phone call started, what Kai found when he followed that name all the way back to the very beginning, and what Yuna does when she finally understands the full scale of what she was part of, subscribe right now and turn on notifications because part 2 of this story is coming. And I promise you, what Kai discovers about the man behind Rex is going to make everything you just watched look like the opening act.